Hi, Leslie. This is Carol here. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I'm sure this is all really, really cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to put my face back up really quick while you're talking.
It'll be good to see you again. So we asked teachers what would be the questions that they would like to ask you if we're doing this live. And we
Okay,
separated 5 questions
great.
that I would love to ask you now. You ready?
I am ready when you are.
So the first question is, what was the most difficult experience you had while working with a PBL project? And what was your biggest challenge and how did you solve it?
Probably the biggest challenge I had was there was a time, not at Full Sail, but at a previous university, where I inherited a class with a project that another instructor had begun that she had to stop in the middle of it. And so the class that I inherited, the students were about to turn in their first step of the project, like the next class period. But the issue with that was that the timeline had not been laid out very specifically. They had not received a lot of really specific instruction about what they were supposed to be doing, how this first stage of the project was supposed to help them meet this overall goal. So the students were super panicked and confused. And the way that I solved it was essentially to start from scratch and to consult the students and to say, okay, our end game is the same. Here is the thing that we're going to make, and here is why we're making it. Here is this first step that you've been asked to do. What do you think you're supposed to be developing in that first step? What's the goal of this first step? Why do you think that this is here? So I kind of snuck in a little bit of Socratic teaching there, but I essentially recreated the timeline for that project with my students from the ground up. And I said, here are your learning outcomes. What do you think we need to do to meet them? And so we created together, we created a new rubric, we created a new timeline, and we just redid the project from scratch. So it was challenging, but it was fun.
Cool. Starting it again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And being flexible, right? That, okay, this might not be working out exactly the way that it's supposed to. So let's find a new way to do it.
Thank you for sharing that. The second question that I have is PBL a valid technique for all situations, or do you recommend other approaches that could be used in connection with PBL?
I mean, I think that one of the benefits of project-based learning is that it is very flexible. So you can use it with a lot of different disciplines, a lot of different goals, and a lot of different approaches. However, this doesn't mean that we have to reinvent the wheel, right? It doesn't mean that we have to completely throw out all of those traditional teaching methods that we've been using for a long time. And one of the great things about project-based learning is that we can scale it up or down, and that it can talk very nicely to more traditional methods of learning. So even if, say, your entire class is not fully like completely a project-based approach, right? You might still give your students an exam. You might still assign a reading. You might still do a lecture, because at some point we still have to give them information. So sometimes those traditional methods are necessary, but I think that there is almost always a way. I'm not going to say always, because there's always an exception to always, right? But that even if a fully project-based approach is not practical, I think it can be integrated in smaller ways and can speak very well and can work very well and be combined with more traditional methods like lectures or exams.
Thank you. The third question that we have is, What is the biggest risk you think a teacher runs while creating a PBL project?
Um, that's actually a really great question. And I think sort of along the lines of what you were asking in your first question about one of the biggest challenges, I think that speaks as well to one of the risks, which is that it's a risk, but it's also what's awesome about it. And what is really, really fun about it is that when you have something that is heavily student led, you don't always know what's going to happen and what's going to go according to plan and what's not going to go according to plan. And sometimes things don't. And sometimes problems crop up that are unforeseeable, or students maybe miss the point sometimes of what the goal of that project was and go off the rails a little bit. And again, kind of like how, like what I was saying to your question about what the challenges are, I think one of the important ways to manage those risks is to be really flexible and to know when, okay, maybe at this point the students have lost sight of what the goal of this project is, and we need to rein them in a little bit, and we need to take them back to basics. Maybe we need to go back a step and adapt and change something before they completely lose sight of what they're doing. But on the other hand, maybe we need to let them go in a direction that we didn't think that they were going in. Maybe they will end up somewhere that was unexpected for them and that was unexpected for us, but that's also really productive and really helps them learn. So as with anything that is student led, I think it's really hard for us as instructors to give up that control. Or maybe I'm projecting, it's hard for me to give up control because I'm a control freak. But the thing that is riskiest is putting learning into the hands of the students, but that's also the thing that is the most fun and the most rewarding.
I was gonna say it sounds like it takes a lot of trusting, right?
It does. And, I think the students pick up on that as well, because when we're presenting information to them as I am the person who knows everything, and you are the person whose job is only to listen to what I'm saying, they're going to disengage. But if they can see, even just based on the structure of what you're asking them to do, that, okay, you are a person whose thoughts I value, and you are a person who has skills that matter and things to say that matter, when they see that you trust them, then they're more invested and they do higher quality work. It can be hard though for those of us who are control freaks.
Yeah, well, it's an exercise for us too, right?
Sure, sure.
So the fourth question we have is how do we convince our school to adopt a PBL approach if they are more traditional and don't want to change the current system?
That is a really great question. And again, and this also kind of speaks to one of your previous questions as well. So I'm seeing a theme happening here. But one of the great things about project-based learning is that it is scalable, and that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to throw out all of those previous teaching methods. So if it's an approach that maybe you're not fully committed to, maybe you just want to try it out, maybe your administration is not fully committed to it and you're trying to pitch just the possibility of trying it out, try it out on a small scale. Maybe say, all right, we're not going to redesign our entire class. We're still going to use these traditional methods, but maybe we're going to have like a 2-week project at the end of the semester, something small, something manageable. Or we're going to try this project-based approach, but maybe let's only do it in the advanced classes. Maybe let's only do it for the seniors and just try it and see how it goes. So just like getting students to buy in, right? I think explaining to administrators, first of all, the value of the approach, right? That, okay, this is research. This is something that helps students learn, that is documented to help students learn more effectively than some more traditional methods of teaching. So if we present them with, okay, well, first of all, this works, this is effective. And second of all, we don't have to completely change everything, because changing an approach in an entire institution is systemically difficult and clunky, and there are a lot of people who have to sign off on a lot of things. So even just getting your foot in the door with, all right, let me try a small thing. And then when the small thing works, then you have leverage to incorporate this approach on a larger scale.
Thank you. The last question is there any literature that you would recommend for teachers that want to learn more about this?
Yes, and I'm going to get rid of my face for a second and pull my slide back up, because I did want to point out a few pieces that I came across when I was doing research to prepare for this talk. So this first one, this top one here, is a book called Transforming Schools Using Project-Based Learning, Performance Assessment, and Common Core Standards. Now, this whole book isn't about project-based learning, but it does provide a really good broad overview of how people who run, I think the authors run I believe it's a middle school, it might be a high school, I can't remember off the top of my head, but how they incorporated a project-based approach into their school. There are a lot of examples in there of projects that their students created, and a lot of research about, okay, well, this is documented proof that project-based learning works. So this book is really, really fantastic. There is also this article. I will be honest that I do not know how to pronounce this author's last name, but the title of the article is Enacting Problem-Posing Education Through Project-Based Learning. And this article is wonderful because, again, it provides more of that documentation of, okay, project-based learning works, and it works better than more traditional teaching methods. And in fact, some of those traditional teaching methods can be harmful. So it's a very short article, but has a lot of information in it. It's actually really great. This third source, this is a website that's lucasedresearch.org. It's actually, as far as I can tell, it's a foundation by George Lucas, like the Star Wars guy. Yeah, apparently funded this research project. But in any case, on this website, you'll find a lot of examples. There's videos, there are breakdowns of different kinds of projects that different instructors did in all kinds of different classes. There's examples for, okay, here's what somebody did in a history class. Here's what somebody did in a science class. Here's what somebody did in a civics class. And a lot of really, really cool examples geared towards K through 12 education. And then this last source is kind of more information about where to get more information. This is a literature review by Sally Kingston, who's one of the authors of this book that I was talking about up here. And this is kind of a repository of more sources and more information about project-based learning than I could possibly talk about right now. So those are just some kind of starting places. That was where I started, and I found them all really valuable.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's been
Yeah,
great.
thank you so much for having me.